Hi, my name is Courtney, and today we're going to be talking about The Wasteland, a poem written by T.S. Eliot that encompasses his battle with neurasthenia and how that is reflected in the long poem that he became known for throughout his career. So, to begin, who was T.S. Eliot? He was a Harvard-educated English-American poet, born in the U.S. and later moved to England. He challenged the standards of poetry, all while valuing traditional American expectations of Christianity and American culture, but wrote about the modern world from a more critical eye than this traditional expectation of American life. The poem The Wasteland is one of his most popular poems. Published in December of 1922, it was a response to the world recovering from the events of World War I. In reading the poem, you can get a sense of the brokenness and lack of hope that encompassed the post-war world at this time. For some background on the contents of the poem, it is broken into 5 sections, all reflective of the trauma born out of the emptiness the war left behind. The very opening lines of the poem set the tone of lifelessness and melancholy, as they read, "April is the cruelest month, gritting lilacs out of the dead land." As for a definition of neurasthenia, there isn't one clear-cut answer. It is vague and loosely defined in any attempt at an initial definition. But essentially, it is a mental illness categorized by emotional disturbance and overall depressive symptoms. Symptoms are extreme and prolonged, including but not limited to fatigue, headaches, irritability, and exhaustion. Neurasthenia has existed under many different names throughout its life, most commonly now common fatigue syndrome. Its original name was coined by George Beard in 1869, and he called it exhaustion of the nervous system. It's a vague mental illness encompassing various neurotic disorders, and experts from Science Direct say it's characterized by a persistent and distressing complaint of increased fatigue after mental effort. In 1921, T.S. Eliot took a 3-month beachside vacation with his wife to escape the stress of his daily life and publishing work, to aid his already declining mental health and struggling marriage. Here he went through therapy, where he would, quote, train his brain out of its habits of anxiety, and The Wasteland became this result of therapy he wrote while on this vacation. Looking at neurasthenia from a modern lens, it is more commonly just extreme symptoms of depression and anxiety, and has evolved into being classified as chronic fatigue syndrome. It wasn't detailed in the DSM until 1968, but since then, the term neurasthenia has lost popularity, but the symptoms remain the same through any classification and are still lifelong. So what is the correlation between neurasthenia and this poem? Well, the poem shows T.S. Eliot's journey throughout his life with mental illness. The way his condition has altered his view of the world is evident in the depressive misery presented in the poem. The accumulation of all these factors together in the poem, conveying the loss people felt after World War I, from the death toll to being lost as to where to go next, T.S. Eliot shows a journey through mental illness, notably neurasthenia, as he depicts a destroyed environment and rapid fall into a mental state of melancholic hopelessness. With the poem being broken down into 5 sections, each one is a step further or another lens of the deep depression Eliot was feeling and how that impacted how he viewed the post-war ridden world around him, where people were grieving and trying to put their homeland back together, both physically and emotionally. The poem begins with the burial of the dead and presents disgust at how lilacs are growing through the decayed ground, and the speaker wishes to be back to winter when snow covered the ground, and there was no sign of new life. The speaker preferred the dead of winter over spring, which brings new life and growth. They are so lost in the depressive state that they desire the decaying winter instead. The second section, A Game of Chess, has continual references to death between the repetition of the line, "Hurry up, please, it's time," which carries an ominous tone suggesting the end is coming, and also through references to Shakespeare's Hamlet, to where Ophelia drowns. The lines quoted are directly from Hamlet and the lines just before her death, suggesting that death is near for the speaker in The Wasteland. The fire sermon shows that all life has left the land, that lively energy is gone and has been replaced with waste and loneliness. The poem reads, "The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimonies of summer nights. The nymphs are departed, and their friends, the loitering heirs of the city directors, departed, have left no address. Trash has filled the once alive river, leaving no one behind and no one to talk to." Death by water is about accepting the fate the speaker assumes to be the only option. They have succumbed to the depression and are unable to fight it. The section tells the story of a Phoenician sailor who drowned at sea and warns the speaker to take the wheel and to look around at the good in the world, but the filter of depression makes them incapable of seeing anything other than misery. What the Thunder said is about succumbing to death and accepting that there is no other alternative. The people who bravely fought in the war have now died, and those left behind will meet the same fate. The speaker says, "He who is living has now dead. We who were living are now dying, with a little patience. They have lost any ounce of hope and have accepted death as their only possible future." So, despite his struggles with neurasthenia, T.S. Eliot is a renowned poet, and a simple Google search will show you how countless people have written responses to his work, specifically with The Wasteland. Sarah Kane from Literature Cambridge writes about how early 20th century psychology was all about targeting the nerves and the stress of modernity, and how the relationship between mind and body and world is reflected in many of his poems, especially in The Wasteland. She writes, "Eliot's work consistently represents the force of modernity and the violence it enacts upon the self as a form of shock, an electrical confrontation that ruptures body, mind, and world." She's speaking of the helplessness the speaker embodies throughout the poem, and how that is in relation to Eliot's depressive view of the modernizing world. So when published after World War I, this poem likely resonated with lots of people. There was a shared sense of hopelessness and loss moving through nations. People were grieving and trying to recover and understand how to move on. And for so many, this poem was the reality, feeling that they just couldn't come back from something traumatic like this, that they were out of control of their lives and just waiting for their death to come inevitably. Despite this poem being written 101 years ago, and relating to the emotion of people recovering from the events of World War I, it remains timeless and can be reread over and over again, with constant references to other literary works and a general theme and tone that can be applied to so many situations where people feel lost and incapable of changing their fate. The poem continues to resonate with readers to this day. Thank you.